The headlights carved twin tunnels through the October darkness as I settled into the familiar rhythm of Route 47. 11:30 p.m., the sweet spot when the highway belonged to long-haul truckers and insomniacs like myself. I discovered this nocturnal sanctuary 3 months ago, when sleep became an elusive phantom and the walls of my apartment pressed too close. Now these midnight drives served as meditation, the dashboard's amber glow and the engine's steady thrum creating a cocoon of solitude between the chaos of day and the restless tossing of night. The radio murmured soft jazz, barely audible above the whisper of tires on asphalt. Miles of pine forest stretched on either side, their silhouettes forming a blanket against the star-studded sky. This was my space, my confessional, 60 miles of empty road where thoughts could unspool without judgment. I'd just passed the rusted mailbox that marked the halfway point when I noticed the car behind me. Its headlights appeared suddenly in my rearview mirror, twin points of light that seemed to materialize from the forest itself. Odd, I hadn't seen another vehicle for 20 minutes. The lights maintained a steady distance, neither gaining nor falling back, their presence somehow more pronounced than the usual highway traffic I'd grown accustomed to ignoring. The jazz station crackled with static. I reached for the dial, but the interference cleared before my fingers made contact. In the brief silence, I could have sworn I heard something else, a low humming that didn't match my engine's pitch. But when the music resumed, the sound vanished, leaving me questioning whether I'd heard anything at all. Mile marker 23 flashed past. The car behind me remained constant, its headlights creating a rectangle of pale light on my rear window. I tapped the brake gently, a subtle signal for the driver to pass. The lights didn't respond, maintaining their fixed distance with mechanical precision. A chill crept along my spine despite the heater's warmth. I pressed the accelerator, watching the speedometer climb from 55 to 75. The lights behind me stayed perfectly positioned, as if tethered by invisible wire. When I slowed back to the speed limit, they matched my deceleration exactly. Just another night owl, I told myself, though my knuckles had gone white against the steering wheel. Someone else seeking solace in the midnight hours. But the rationalization felt hollow. In 3 months of these drives, I'd encountered plenty of late-night travelers. Truckers would lumber past with diesel thunder. Teenagers would tailgate aggressively before roaring ahead. Shift workers would maintain polite distances before turning off at their respective exits. This was different. This felt deliberate. The radio hissed again, longer this time. Through the static came a sound that made my breath catch. Children singing, their voices thin and distant, weaving a melody I almost recognized. The tune felt familiar, like something half-remembered from a fever dream. Then, the jazz returned, smooth and uninterrupted, as if nothing had happened. I glanced at the rearview mirror. The headlights were closer now, close enough that I could make out the dark shape of the vehicle between them. A sedan, perhaps, though its details remained frustratingly obscured. The driver was invisible behind the windshield's reflection. My hands trembled as I reached for the radio again, needing the comfort of human voices. But as my fingers touched the dial, the lights behind me flashed once, a deliberate, knowing signal that sent ice through my veins. Coincidence. The word felt like a prayer. Just coincidence. But when I moved my hand away from the radio, the lights flashed again. The forest pressed closer now, the trees forming walls of impenetrable shadow. Mile marker 19 appeared and vanished. The exit I usually took was still 8 miles ahead, but suddenly that distance felt infinite. The car behind me had become a presence, a weight that transformed my sanctuary into something else entirely. I tried to focus on the road ahead, on the familiar landmarks that marked my nightly journey. The abandoned barn with its collapsed roof, the billboard advertising a restaurant that had closed years ago, the bridge over the creek where teenagers used to park. But each familiar sight felt wrong now, as if viewed through a lens that had shifted slightly out of focus. The humming returned, stronger this time, audible even over the radio. It seemed to come from everywhere, the engine, the tires, the very air itself. A low, resonant drone that made my teeth ache and my vision blur at the edges. I shook my head, trying to clear the sensation, but it clung like cobwebs. Mile marker 17. The headlights behind me pulsed in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Or perhaps my heart was matching them. The distinction no longer seemed important. "Pull over," a voice whispered in my mind. Let it pass. But the thought of stopping, of sitting helpless in the darkness while that car, I corrected myself, approached, filled me with primal terror. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed past 70. The headlights matched my speed effortlessly, their glow now filling my entire rear window. In that harsh light, my reflection looked strange, hollow-eyed and gaunt, like something wearing my face as a mask. The radio died completely, leaving only the engine's roar and that underlying hum that seemed to vibrate in my bones. Through the silence came a new sound, tapping, rhythmic and patient, like fingers drumming against glass. But I was alone in the car. The windows were closed. The sound had no source. Tap, tap, tap. I risked another glance in the mirror and saw something that made my blood freeze. Behind the headlights, silhouetted against the car's interior, was a figure. It sat perfectly still, hands positioned at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. But its head was turned toward me, and even through the distance and darkness, I could see its smile. The smile was too wide, too knowing. It stretched across a face that seemed to shift and blur whenever I tried to focus on it, as if my eyes refused to process what they were seeing. But the smile remained constant, a crescent of impossible white that seemed to glow with its own light. Mile marker 15. My exit was 3 miles away, but the distance felt like crossing an ocean. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, and I realized with growing horror that it was coming from inside my own car. From the roof, the windows, the dashboard, everywhere at once. Tap, tap, tap. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for any connection to the normal world, but the screen remained black, unresponsive to my frantic pressing. Dead. Like the radio, like everything that might have anchored me to reality. The car behind me was so close now that I could see details that shouldn't have been visible in the darkness. The license plate was blank, a rectangle of perfect white. The windshield reflected nothing, not the sky, not my taillights, nothing. And behind it, that figure continued to smile, its head cocked at an angle that suggested curiosity or hunger. Mile marker 13. The humming had become a roar, drowning out even my engine's noise. My vision swam, reality tilting like a ship in heavy seas. The forest on either side seemed to pulse with hidden life, shadows moving between the trees in patterns that hurt to perceive. And then I saw it, my exit, blessed and familiar, rising from the darkness like salvation itself. I yanked the wheel hard right, tires screaming against asphalt, as I took the ramp at dangerous speed. Behind me, the headlights continued straight, disappearing down the highway as if they had never existed. I pulled into the first parking lot I found, a closed diner with a neon sign that flickered erratically. My hands shook as I turned off the engine, the sudden silence deafening after the night's cacophony. The dashboard clock read 12:47 a.m., though it felt like hours had passed since I'd first noticed those lights. I needed air, needed space. The car felt suffocating after what I'd experienced, so I pushed open the door and stepped into the cool night. The autumn wind cut through my jacket as I leaned against the hood, taking deep, shuddering breaths. Above me, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the terror that had followed me down that dark highway. I stayed there for several minutes, letting the normalcy of the night air and the distant hum of the interstate convince me that exhaustion and imagination had conspired to create the evening's horrors. When I finally felt steady enough to continue home, I slid back into the driver's seat and reached for the ignition. That's when I saw it. There, on the passenger seat where nothing had been before, lay a single white flower. Its petals were perfect, untouched by time or weather, and it seemed to glow faintly in the dashboard's dim light. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't seen anyone approach the car. I'd been standing right there, watching the empty lot, the deserted road. The doors had been locked. The flower's fragrance filled the air, sweet and cloying, like funeral parlors and forgotten graves. My hands trembled as I stared at it. This impossible thing that shouldn't exist couldn't exist. But it was real. Terrifyingly, undeniably real. With shaking fingers, I carefully picked up the flower, holding it as if it might burn me. I got out of the car again, walked to the edge of the parking lot where weeds pushed through cracked asphalt, and knelt down. Using my bare hands, I scraped away dirt and gravel until I'd made a small depression in the earth. "Whatever you are," I whispered to the darkness, "whoever you were, please, just rest now." I placed the flower gently in the makeshift grave and covered it with soil, pressing the earth down with trembling palms. Maybe it would help. Maybe it would give peace to whatever restless spirit had followed me. Maybe it would give me peace, too. I drove home with the windows down, letting the highway wind whip through the car, trying to clear away the lingering sweetness that seemed to cling to my clothes, my hair, my very skin. But even as the miles passed and my house came into view, I knew the scent would never truly leave me. That night had changed something fundamental inside me, opened a door to a world I'd never believed existed. And though I'd buried the flower and whispered my prayers to the darkness, I understood with cold certainty that some encounters mark you forever. The memory of those following headlights, of that impossible bloom, would haunt every midnight drive for the rest of my life.